thank you. This is the next session that follows, and this one is looking at investment and encouraging investment beyond the demonstrators, really. So we've been leading up to this point. There's been a lot of unlocking of some of the challenges that get us to move so far, but ultimately we need a transition and we need to invest in this space. I've got a couple of people up here. We don't have their names up yet, but we've got Alistair from iUK. We've got Brian, who was just here previously, slightly different hat on this time. And we've got Tom from the Green Finance Institute. And they've recently put out a report which is probably worth a look. And I think just one of the really interesting points that comes out of that is at the moment, I think it's about 0.1% of zero emission trucks on the road. So there is a huge number that we need to transition over the coming time. I'm just going to ask you a quick question to start out, and then we will go to taking some of the other questions. So, where's my question? To all, what is the most important action to be taken to attract investment into this ecosystem? So we start with Tom? Sure.
So I think we've heard it in previous panels, but I think the most important thing is collaboration. It sounds like that's something that we've heard before, but I think it really is the case when it comes to investment. It's a huge challenge transitioning HGVs to zero emission technologies. Transport operators are up against probably the biggest challenge of their careers. So just to give an example of one form of collaboration that could happen is around charging infrastructure. So, can transport operators, instead of, traditionally they're very competitive, they don't like to share their resources. Instead, can they be more collaborative and invest in charging infrastructure together? And what that can do from their benefit is obviously sharing of resources and capital expenditure. And then from a finance perspective, having more counterparties involved can help de-risk the investment as well. So that can help flood in more investment into the space. So that's just one example. And that's something actually that we're looking on scaling up at the Green Finance Institute. Okay. Anybody else?
Brian? Or I can chip in. I was going to say, taking a holistic view. It's part of looking at that bigger picture in investment. It's not just about the vehicles and the infrastructure. I think Marge made the point earlier this afternoon. It's also crucially about the people. And I think we also need to look holistically about where the money for investment should come from. And I don't think it's fair or reasonable to place the burden of that upfront investment and the initial costs on the early adopters and the people that really want to do the right thing and are prepared to get on with it. We have to have a more go-net conversation about where the laggards, the polluter pays type principles, concept, dare I say it, of the fuel duty escalator, whether we do that by that mechanism or it's road pricing or whatever. But the people who are sitting on their hands not doing what they probably should be need to be chipping in, I think, and helping the people that are doing the right thing to get on with it.
Okay, and my angle will be around confidence and what we can do to inspire confidence. So it's very easy, I think, to kind of dwell on all the challenges and all the difficult bits and the blockers. And really, for people to make investment decisions, they need certainty and confidence. So we need to work on showing people what is possible and how it can be done, and ways to remove barriers and solutions, and use that to try and encourage confidence.
Great. I have got quite a few coming in. What are the most promising areas within the zero emission HGV sector for potential investors to focus on, and why?
I know where I'd start. Shall I go first?
Please.
In terms of in terms of where to start, battery electric HGVs are on the market now, available now, have been for a few years. They are expensive, but it's pretty clear now that they're going to take the vast majority of the share in terms of market. So that is a very obvious place to start. It's anything that can be done to test those or figure out where they can work in terms of operations. So taking telematics data and working with various companies who will help you understand how you could convert those vehicles to battery electric and do what you need to do. So yeah, anything around battery electric vehicles is a very obvious place.
Yep, I'd echo that and focus it perhaps on the depot charging infrastructure. I think that's the early hit. That's where not just the transmission networks but the distribution networks. We need a kind of national plan, a national roadmap to get, because the vast majority of trucks are either completely depot based or spend a lot of their time in depots and will need to be charged up. Sometimes quite slowly overnight, sometimes quite quickly. So that whole power infrastructure for that fleet is a key challenge that we need to be getting on with very quickly.
I would say one of the key things that we need to focus on in order for the industry to transition is helping SMEs. Half the SMEs in the UK, half the trucks in the UK are owned by SMEs. So we really need, and a lot of them don't have access to the funds that they need to be able to buy these vehicles or to install the infrastructure. So whatever we can do to provide them with support or the finance that they need to do that, we should be exploring. So, for example, something that's happened in the US in California, the state government there provided a guarantee to lenders who were providing loans to smaller operators who were retrofitting their trucks or buying newer, lower emission trucks. And this was a really successful scheme in enabling adoption. It required a relatively small amount of public capital relative to the private capital that it flooded in. I think it flooded in at something about 10 times the amount of private capital. And it, as I say, it really helped grow adoption of the vehicles and lower the emissions of the sector. So I think supporting SMEs is an area that I would suggest that we focus on.
Yeah, there's a question here is asking what innovative financing models could be implemented to support the adoption of zero-emission HGVs, especially for SMEs. So probably leaning towards answering that one, I think you probably have. And then another one, how can the sector overcome the challenge of higher upfront costs associated with zero-emission HGVs to attract more investment?
Can I take this one?
Yeah.
Well, so finance can be a really important way of overcoming that upfront cost. I mean, this is obviously, it's nothing new, the idea of an operating lease where operators are able to have lower cost finance because they're only paying for the depreciation of the vehicle rather than the full cost of the asset. So that's nothing new, but the problem is that because this is a new sector, investors aren't necessarily offering that finance products at the moment. And a lot of this is because it's unclear what the future value of these trucks are going to be. There's so few of them at the moment. Nobody knows what they're going to be worth in 5 years' time. So what we're really interested in at the Green Finance Institute is potentially a residual value guarantee, and that could be again provided by government, and that could provide confidence to lenders around the residual value of those products, of those trucks, so that they can offer these finance products to lenders, to operators. Sorry, and in doing that, that will enable lower access to lower cost finance and enable more adoption. And really, I think a residual value guarantee doesn't necessarily it's like you're asking the government for more money, but it can be a case of repurposing what money is already on the table. So there's the plug-in truck grant available to operators at the moment, and I think that's had relatively low uptake. So potentially could that be repurposed instead, that pot of money, and if you gave that instead to the finance sector to crowd in more private finance, that could be a more effective use of government funds.
And
To add, I think the California link and the retrofitting is also an area that we're not paying enough attention to. I was really sad to see Lunas's administration that was announced yesterday or earlier this week. I don't know exactly the details of that company's problems, but the basic premise of we've got a whole load of existing trucks out there. As battery technologies evolve and battery prices get cheaper and more, we get more and more expertise in building battery electric trucks and the infrastructure to go with them. Then the option of retrofitting 3, 4, 5-year-old combustion engine vehicles with those cheapish batteries becomes quite attractive, particularly, for example, to the SMEs who can't afford a brand new truck, let alone a brand new battery electric truck. So whether that's something that independent players like Lunas need to be playing in, or whether it's something that the existing major OEMs, the Volvos and the DAFs and the Mercs of this world need to be starting to think about retrofitting their older fleet, I don't know, but I don't think we should ignore the concept.
And what is the role for local transport authorities in some of these actions? Or do you think there is one?
Definitely. Do you want to get with that?
Do you want to start?
I can start. There's a couple of areas that spring to mind. I mean, one is it's crucial in the depot-based charging and the planning and the infrastructure around that. Local authorities working with the DNOs, with their logistics providers in their area to understand what the needs are and do what they can to facilitate that power delivery piece. But there's also local authority things like zero emission zones, clean air zones, nighttime deliveries. There's various things also within the gift of local authorities, particularly some of the big cities, that can help, that can provide that extra business case for a battery electric truck operator to do things that they can't do with a chugging old dirty noisy diesel vehicle.
Sure. And Tom touched on the point earlier about collaboration, and maybe there's an opportunity where infrastructure exists to try and share it between public and private users.
Okay. Yeah.
And to add to that as well, I think there's definitely an opportunity for, as Alistair says, for local authorities to be driving this, because often local authorities, they have large fleets themselves, and you can look at the movement of those fleets, and that can be used to identify where charging infrastructure should go. And also local authorities often do own quite a bit of land as well. So that, again, that's a huge challenge when installing the infrastructure that you need is finding the right plots of land. So there's the kind of the resources that local authorities have can really be used as kind of the first step in establishing the decarbonisation in the area. And they can also be, that can be used as a rally point for local transport operators as well.
Sure, and I guess the more that the local authorities understand this transition themselves from their own first-hand experience, the more they'll be able to help organisations that want to work with them. They'll be able to share that knowledge across these organisations.
So how can investors assess the risk and potential of emerging technologies within the zero-emission HGV space, such as electric versus hydrogen fuel cell vehicles?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, why not? I think this kind of relates to one of the concerns I have with the ZHID trials. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the ZHID trials, but they won't do everything. I think they're not the be-all and end-all. Because of this rapidly evolving technology space, and whether it's batteries or charging infrastructure, charging speeds, etc., it's all evolving at pace. So sticking a load of trucks on the road in 2024 and then kind of sitting back and monitoring what they're doing and reporting in 2030 that they could do this job very well and this job they couldn't do very well is kind of a bit irrelevant. It's like if you're considering buying a new car now, reading a report that tells you how good a 2016 Nissan Leaf was, or is. You need to know what's currently on available and what's currently the market state is. So that need to for investment plans and companies that are making investments and starting the transition to be able to flex and evolve as the technology develops and new options come into play, not just kind of engineering technology, but the business models and the finance models as well. I think it's crucial. So it's kind of investing in a more uncertain world, I think, is where we need to get to.
It's quite agile, really.
Yes, agile investing. I like that.
Can I challenge one element of that, Brian? So with commercial vehicle, I suppose it's an asset for a business. So if someone can sort of deploy it and do a certain thing and generate return, then that's all lovely, and they can kind of build a business case to do that. If something better comes along, it doesn't necessarily undermine what's already happening. So with the demonstrator program and working with the Department of Transport, we need to be careful that we publish as much as we can as quickly as possible, so people know about the current technology today, not in 4 or 5 years' time. But I think new technology doesn't necessarily undermine what already exists, unless it can come along and do the same thing for less money somehow.
Yeah. To use I absolutely agree with that. To use my Nissan Leaf point, yes, if you've got a Nissan Leaf and you're only doing 50 miles a day and it does the job perfectly well, then it will still do the job perfectly well. It's kind of, but I think it was Camilla mentioned the 2040 date for Arctics. Well, no one's expecting in 2040 that we're going to meet that objective of 100% new sales with the sorts of trucks that are currently available today. In the same way as if you're thinking of buying a new phone or a new laptop in a couple of years' time, it won't be the same as what's on the market now. It'll be faster, it'll be cheaper, it'll be lighter, it'll be faster charging, whatever. It won't be the same. So it's kind of anticipating that change. And whilst you can never be certain of anything in the future, being able to make a credible plan on the basis of a likely change or a likely evolution of technology is part of where we need to get to, rather than just sit and wait for the answer to already exist.
Yeah, I think we're in a period of change, and we need to be moving in the right direction, and I think that's really important. Is the UK competing with other countries for foreign investment, and how does the UK attract international finance?
We'll all look at Tom, shall we?
That's a good question. I think it's with the long-term policy certainty, I think, really is the key one if you're looking at international investment. So what we've done in the UK is great so far when it comes to trucks. You've got the 2035 deadline to phase out trucks under 26 tonnes. You've got the 2040 deadline. You've got the, Marge mentioned earlier, the incoming zero-emission HGV infrastructure strategy. So that obviously gives investors a huge amount of confidence when it comes to knowing what the future is going to look like. And I think really it's just, it's about building on that. And I think, one thing that if we're thinking about infrastructure, that's a hugely important part of building confidence. And I think if you were to build on that to further attract investment, you would go into, the next step will be to go into more detail and look at, I think the US mentioned this, published this week their strategy looking to create freight corridors across the country. And that kind of thing is hugely attractive, not just for operators because they know where the infrastructure is going to be, but also to investors because that gives them more understanding of what the utilisation is going to be, for example. I think long-term policy certainty is the key there.
Do you want to say anything more about the importance of utilisation for investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's something that we're really interested in helping investors get more comfortable with. So at the GFI, we're really focused on what financing solutions can help unlock more finance. And one of those ideas is the idea of utilisation-linked finance. So at the moment, because there's so few electric trucks out there, utilisation is obviously relatively low, which means that if you're a charge point operator or you're somebody who's installing these charge points, you're not going to have a huge amount of, the income is relatively uncertain in the early years of the project. So the utilisation linked finance is this idea: can you provide a finance product to that installer that shifts the repayment period for that loan to the same period that they're earning the revenue? So it's kind of like a student loan. You only start paying it back once you actually start earning something, and that can really help de-risk these projects for charge point operators and installers, and it's something that investors, that they're willing to consider as well, and we've trialled it in the EV segment. Okay. We've launched a pilot project, and that was really interesting because not only did it enable the installation of charge points, but the Green Finance Institute provided a small risk share guarantee, and that helped the lender get comfortable by providing kind of a minimum floor of risk. And again, that's something that we're interested in exploring. Entities, that's potentially a role for philanthropic finance, or again, government. There are various ways that you can get that money from, but I think there's lots of options when it comes to addressing utilisation.
Right, and what thought is going into redefining the distribution process ahead of changing the propulsion system? Surely just converting the trucks from ICE to BEV may not be the ideal solution? Question mark.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah, go on then.
So I guess the really short answer is that no, it definitely isn't the solution just to try and swap the powertrain and assume it will all work. One of the really nice things about the Zero Emission HGV and Infrastructure Demonstrator Programme with the Department for Transport is the fact that we can do this big experiment, right? We can using taxpayer funding and that linked to the Department for Transport, we can get a load of vehicles on the road much earlier than you'd be able to do otherwise. And it's a bit unnatural in ways, and it'll cause some problems and some challenges, no doubt, in doing it. But what it enables people to do is really understand how they need to restructure their operations. If they do need to restructure their operations, maybe they can make them more efficient and bring their costs down as they learn about technology. And then what we'll do then is try and share that learning as much as possible. So maybe not the really commercially sensitive bits, but the kind of the general learning that will come through doing that, we can share it as much as possible. So in doing that, we can help the whole industry to understand how they need to change or where they could change in order to make the most of the shift in powertrain. So not just how to cope with it, but how to maximise the opportunity.
Yes, and that leads on exactly. The industry tends to talk about in terms of total cost of ownership, and I prefer to use the word total opportunity of ownership, because it isn't just about the very easily measurable costs and benefits in terms of energy savings and things against the extra cost of the truck and the infrastructure. It is about, well, you'll have happier drivers, you'll have less stressed drivers, you'll have healthier drivers, you'll have a better public image, you'll be able to attract new contracts and win contracts you might not have won otherwise, because you're clearly a leader in the transition to net zero. So there are all these less tangible benefits of the transition that all play in. So it is about optimisation. Hauliers have spent 100 years optimising on the basis of diesel trucks. I don't think it will take them another 100 years to optimise on the basis of electric trucks, but it will be a different. The way the business model, the way they operate, beds down will be different and should be different. And that's not necessarily a challenge. It's equally an opportunity. You might end up at the end state with that new settled condition may actually be better than you ever could have achieved with a diesel fleet.
Yeah, and if I could add one more point to the back end of this, right? For some businesses, this will be a huge opportunity for them. So you've got companies like FSCW in South Wales or Welch's Transport that are building this into their offering and trying to make sure that they can serve this new market more effectively than the incumbents because of moving to this technology more aggressively and learning how to use it quicker.
I hope you're not planning to go back to diesel, Jamie. You're not about to. Good.
Yes, on the point that you made, I think it links back to the flex standards that are being developed and having mobile facilities as well to help understand where points, recharge or refuel points may be located.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting. The flex standard I'm involved in with Matteo and BSI is around obviously fixed charging sites, and the ZHID trials are funding fixed infrastructure sites at motorway service areas or logistics parks and what have you. But the idea that actually over the next few years, kind of a truck as a battery, if you like, a mobile truck, you can pack quite a big battery on the back of an Arctic or in a container. That kind of mobility of charge point, I think, is potentially an interesting area as, again, batteries get cheaper and you can trickle charge them overnight relatively cheaply. The idea that all charge points have to be kind of fixed in the ground is not necessarily the only way of doing it.
Can you discuss the role of public-private partnership in accelerating investment into zero-emission HGV infrastructure?
Do you want to start, Tom?
Yeah, very happy to. I mean, I think I've mentioned some of the partnerships that you can have already. So, for example, the residual value guarantee idea I mentioned earlier. That's something where, again, it's very much. It's how can you take what the limited public resource that's available and provide confidence to the private sector, because ultimately transitioning to net zero is going to cost a huge amount of money, and most of that is going to have to be borne by the private sector. So it's about where can the public sector be most effective with what the resources it does have. And often that can, grants in the early stages have a very important role to play, but guarantees can play a very effective role in flooding in private capital. So a residual value guarantee, that would help to provide more low-cost finance for trucks. You could also look at potentially, again, the utilisation idea. Could government step in and provide a utilisation guarantee to charge point operators? So there's various options there, and we're actively exploring all of them at the GFI.
And I guess this is a bit of a stretch, but I'll go with it. So a lot of what Innovate UK does is around public-private partnerships, in a sense, not in the traditional sense, but we're in a lot of cases using public funding to try and help private industry on the understanding that helps the entire economy grow, and therefore feeds back into the public purse. So there's a huge amount that programs like this zero emission HGV and infrastructure demonstrator with the Department for Transport. I really should start using the acronym, shouldn't I? There's an awful lot that we can do just by using taxpayer funding, working with private sector, but then trying to share some of that learning as wide as possible.
And I'll just add, obviously, one of my hats, and I've been very closely involved with ZEMO Partnership, formerly the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership, for most of the last decade, and they're a kind of public-private partnership as well, also not in the conventional sense, but they are government, local and national, working with industry, with academia, with local government, with fuel suppliers, with truck manufacturers, with all sorts of different stakeholders in this transition. And I think that's a hugely valuable model, and we kind of need to. The role of government, as I say, isn't just to provide money and financing in the form of carrots. It is also, I think, going to be more and more about the sticks and working with the industry, with the trade associations, with the wider community, to work out what's fair and equitable for SMEs, for the big hauliers, for the smaller hauliers, for the early adopters, and for the laggards, that kind of helps this overall investment work more effectively for everybody.
Right. Are we out of time?
We are out of time, unfortunately, yes. You got the cue.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and for your input. And we do need to get the investment flowing. So We do need to move it forward. And it's not going to be business as usual. It will be different from how it is now. So, yeah, it's exciting times. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.